This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
While growing up in school during the 1980s, I had only two pairs of shoes to see me through rain or sunshine. One chunky black formal shoe and one white canvas Keds. Good old humble Bata for all the running, jumping, scampering, or simply monkeying around.
Anabolic Beatz.
On September 15th, Nike created a revolutionary new basketball shoe. On October 18th, the NBA threw them out of the game. Fortunately, the NBA can't stop you from wearing them. Air Jordans from Nike.
They're just sneakers.
Look, I'll take 10,000 for these.
Nah, I don't want those, brother. I don't like glow-in-the-dark shoes.
This whole thing is about sneakers?
No.
Yes.
Who knew back then that my basic Keds, on which I would often rub chalk on, would stop being a child's play and become this multi-billion-dollar interplay between sports, fashion, basketball, hip-hop, all within just 2 to 3 decades. On last count, Nike is on track to make $50 billion of sales this year, making it a standout athletics brand. But there are some like Ravi Kallayil, till recently head of Nike's global innovation, who chose to leave all that gold rush and come back to India to focus on the basics to disrupt an often neglected segment: kids' footwear. His mission? How to take the kid back to play. It's Friday, 12th November. From the Economic Times, I'm Arijit Barman. You are listening to the Morning Brief. In this episode, we will hear the story about Plaeto, but with an E, a new startup founded by Ravi himself with old colleagues from Nike, the science and engineering that goes behind making a pair of sports shoes. Also, we'll ask his investors about the unit economics and if the concept of an all-day, everyday footwear for a growing child can be scaled up in a hyper-competitive market where brands like Reebok, Adidas fight with Bata and Campus and many more for shelf space. But before we tie up our laces, I thought I would do a small survey of my own with the kids from my building to figure out what's hot and happening.
It's like I've been wearing Nike since I was 5. I've never had any discomfort or any dislikes in the shoe because they're really good. They fit me well. It's a proper soccer shoe for myself.
When you are choosing your shoes, is how much importance do you give to style and how much is it to your
Style? I don't think about the style. I feel the quality. If it is synthetic nylon, then I go for that because leather is not my kind for wearing football.
Okay.
And the one thing I noticed is that not one of them mentioned the price of their preferred shoe. We have indeed come a long way from our humble socialist India days where kids from middle-class families like mine had to make one pair last at least a couple of years because
ऐसे पेड़ पे नहीं उगते.
So then, let's literally put on the shoe on the other foot and find out what's Plaeto all about, both from a business and from a social point of view. Ravi, welcome to the Morning Brief.
I wanted to start with you and, first off, figure out what's with the name. I mean, is it Plaeto, but you have an additional E to it? Is it Plato or is it something else? Am I getting it wrong?
No, it's actually Plato and spelt with an additional E. It's a combination of play and lato, which in lato in Latin means happy. So, which basically means play happy. And we all know from our own lives that children are happiest when they play. And shoe is an integral part of play. So, that is where we got this inspiration on Plato.
That's really interesting. But you've worked in US in Nike for a long time. You also headed Nike in India. Why suddenly become an entrepreneur and start Plato in the first place?
So it's a long story, Arijit. In fact, in 2010, a kid named Ricky Bengani reached out to me through a handwritten letter asking for a discount on a Nike shoe. And I just felt the need to go ahead and work on developing a product that every child in India can access, a world class product. And in order to do that, when I moved to the US, I just ended up working with a great bunch of people, including Bruce Kilgore, and Sarah, who's in fact, both of them were in my team. And Bruce is like a mentor who has worked with the likes of Michael Jordan.
That's very interesting. But just a quick rewind, just to understand. You talked about Bruce. So Bruce Kilgore and Michael Jordan. I think Michael Jordan, the Michael Jordan Nike sneaker is cult. It's one of the highest selling, SKU. I think for Nike forever. Is that the same Bruce Kilgore you're talking about?
Yeah, so all the work around the product that we are talking about today is being done by Sarah, who's a chief design officer. Bruce is more like a mentor for us, and so it's the same Bruce Kilgore who has worked with Michael Jordan and created Air Force One, which is the largest selling franchise footwear in the history of athletic footwear.
Wow. Okay. So so you and Sarah were working in Nike in the innovation lab. So I guess you guys were colleagues. So and that's where you met. But what about your third founder? How did you guys all three come together, and how, when and where did you decide, okay guys, enough of this cushy corporate life. Let's do something entrepreneurial. And more importantly, let's do something for India.
Correct. So our third founder is Pawan Kareti. Pawan spent a lot of time in Apple, heading their sales function. And so, in between, when Sarah and I were working on this project, we were looking for somebody to kind of help us understand the Indian market a little better. And Pawan was between his Apple job and the next one. So he had come on board as an entrepreneur in residence in Nike's innovation accelerator called Valiant Labs. So that's how all three of us got together when we realized that the project had got stuck and we needed to do something on our own to make it come alive.
So, how are you leveraging your past experience in your respective companies into, Plato as an organization? Now you're actually steering the ship.
Correct. So there are two aspects to it. One is trying to make a world class shoe for the Indian child, but also in the process of making the shoe, we wanted to make a shoe that has the lowest impact on Earth, because we know that 26 billion pairs of footwear is made annually, and every one of those goes into landfill.
So, sorry to interject, Ravi. What do you mean by goes back into the landfill? As to when we discard the shoe, I was under the impression that there's a lot of recycling that happens.
Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Every footwear is made with a composite of materials. So the multiple materials join together using adhesive and various other techniques, and you cannot separate that. So as a result of which, it is very expensive to recycle used footwear. And when you travel in India, you can see a lot of footwear lying around. So that's what happens.
So you were saying that how you experience, your research and customize it for India.
First thing we did was to research the Indian child's feet. We spent thousands of hours researching, what a child's feet is. So, for example, we went around the country, measured or scanned the feet of 500 children using digital scanners, and then we developed this product using some of the best engineering talent across the world. For example, the engineers that worked on it are people from the US, from Italy, etc. Some of the best footwear engineers. And once we made that, we've done 4,000 hours of research testing the shoe with children playing basketball, tennis. There is one person who's really walked and run 500 kilometers in the shoe. So in this research, we found a lot of interesting data points. For example, we found that 50% of the children will outgrow the shoe within the school year. And if all of us have gone through this stage where we are forced to kind of wear a tight shoe because it's the last 3 months of the year, it can be very, very painful when we subject our kids to that. and it has a long term impact on the health of the feet because you're kind of crunching your feet for hours together and making them walk around.
My parents would buy a size bigger, and I would, put socks or something so that it becomes a snug fit, and and deal with it.
So, Arijit, I'll ask you a question. How many times have you tripped wearing a bigger shoe?
Yes, quite a few times.
So that is on the foot itself. So we created a shoe for a world-class shoe, but also, as I said, we wanted to make a shoe that is sustainable. We have a carbon footprint of about 6.5 kg of carbon per pair. This is one of the lowest in the world. And the interesting thing is, a similar shoe that a very large brand would put out would cost you about 120 to $150.
That leads me to the next question, because I'm really surprised. You did so much of investment in R&D itself. Is footwear for children a big enough market in India to take this plunge?
India has 300 million children, school-going children. 150 of them, million of them go to private schools. About two and a half, three pairs is what each of them on an average own. So the market itself, if you take 500 rupees a shoe or a footwear, it goes into tens and thousands of crores in terms of the market value. No one's really talked about foot health to an Indian parent. And the moment they hear about the impact of bad footwear, they're not going to cringe on spending 300 rupees or 400 rupees to get a really good shoe, which a child can really wear and forget about everything else and play unbounded.
Correct. I understand the India use case, but why will a kid, wear your product when I am bombarded with advertisements from Nike and Reebok, and it's big athletes endorse them, these brands. So it's also a statement for kids to wear a Nike or flaunt an Adidas.
So it's an interesting problem because when children hit 12 and 13 years of age, they develop a mind of their own when it comes to shoes. They really want the brands. Our main focus is children below 12, where there is some amount of rational thinking done by the parent in terms of what shoe to buy, and we are hoping that that rationality can help us get our shoes into the feet of children, and once they experience it, I think it is as good, if not better, than any of the other shoes that they could buy at a much lower price. So no one really wants to buy a 10,000 rupee shoe and use it for 4 months and then give it away because child's feet is grown.
Yes. So are you saying that all the shoes or the brands that are available in India are not really designed keeping the Indian child and their body type in mind? We are just getting products made in China by American or European brands and just shipping it to India.
I don't want to point a finger on any competitor, but I would say that generally across the world, kids' feet is basically a miniaturization of adult feet, and that has its own consequences. A school shoe in India, for example, in order to provide durability, they use a very hard bottom. So essentially, you've created a shoe where your child's feet is stuck in a certain position for 8 hours a day, and that has long-term impact.
Ravi, in terms of production, where are you now and how are you looking to ramp it up? What are the milestones that you have in mind?
Yeah, so when I get into production, one of the interesting things we've addressed is that we want to make this 100% in India. We're probably 99% there. There's 1% that we have to import, but we'll localize it soon. In fact, we are already selling on Amazon and our own store. In fact, we got letters of intent from multiple schools from across the country. In fact, interestingly, some of these letters of intent are coming from tier 2, tier 3 towns, which is where I think the aspiration levels for good product exist.
For you, I guess, so far, listening to your mission, it seems that you don't want to stop at just selling a pair of sneakers. Instead, you're looking to go beyond, build a community. Now, kids generally, at least in cities, are becoming very, very sedentary. And I guess COVID has added to it as well. And parents would have them rather spend time on coding rather than play cricket or football. How do you go about building this community?
One of the things that we are planning to do is, and this is where someone of Rahul Dravid's stature is also believing in our mission, because We want to go to schools, get kids more active. We want to make the 2 hours of PE education or PE period in a school most joyful part of their lives. If you look at what happens in a PE period, there are a bunch of kids who play basketball, others are sitting around. We are trying to get everybody to play together using games which may not be, games that are represented in the Olympics, but it may be fun games where there is a lot of activity and, physical movement.
But what about excellence? If you see a child is really great in one particular discipline, that's how does he or she, or where does Plato come into the picture to take that talent to the next level and maybe a future Olympian as well? Because that's a problem. One of the problems is that we do not really go to the grassroots and catch talent young.
We want to see if with using our network with some of the sports people that we have built, we can bring specialist coaches to help increase their talent. In fact, we are in conversation with some of the best sportsmen in India, from football to athletics, and these are world champions in the various sports. So they are interested in helping us out with this. We just need to get started once COVID kind of goes away and schools reopen.
Now, I want to understand, who is the Plato user? Are you planning to revolutionize footwear for the kid who now plays barefoot in a village, or wears chappals to school? Or are you looking at being an alternative for kids in bigger cities and towns? Who is the classic Plato?
So, when we segmented the market, we said, let's go, and offer this to children who are first in private schools, because that's where, footwear wearing is compulsory, shoes is compulsory, and that was the biggest use case we saw, to make an impact. But
So that's the 150 million catchment you're talking about.
correct. Yeah. So, one of the things we realized was, if we have to make a world class shoe, first we have to really learn how to make it at these kind of prices. So, first approach was to make it at prices we knew we could do, uh, and that would target the 150 million. But next phase of it, we want to really see if we can even address the other 150 million who probably we are not looking at today. And that is also an equally important market for us.
It's all heart, no doubt. But what about the money? So I asked Mathew Cyriac, CEO and founder of Florintree Advisors, one of the angel investors, to do the maths for me. Matthew surely knows his numbers. After all, he was also the India co-head of Blackstone, the biggest private equity firm in the whole world, for several years before starting up on his own.
Now, if you could explain the unit economics, and I would like both Ravi and Matthew to chip in, because at the end of the day, as I said, this is a business. So how do you, and these days every startup aspires to become a unicorn, and then perhaps even, I think even unicorn's not enough. You have to be a decacorn. So, how do you go there?
Even at the price points that we are looking at, this is a business that can generate a 45 to 50% gross profit. We could be looking at a million pair of shoes in a very kind of a near term basis. So the kind of revenue traction and the gross profit pool based on the efficient manufacturing, kind of innovative design, when you put all of that together at a per shoe level, the profitability is going to be quite attractive.
What will be the key differentiator that will make it stand out? Because at one end of the spectrum you have campus, local homegrown player. You also have a Bata in the middle. Then at the higher end you have a Nike, Reebok, the specialists like Asics, etc., and the others. So it's clearly a dog eat dog out there.
At the end of the day, the differentiation here is actually for the first time for a large population, 300 million children, somebody is actually building a product that is meant for them. And one of the things that, as Ravi mentioned, we're going to be both focusing on the school channel and also through online other offline channels. But I think the school channel is going to be a pretty important one, because that's where we get to really kind of address the real customer, that is a child, directly.
Because I was talking to a few friends who are parents, and the sense that I got is they're willing to pay a premium on trust and familiarity. But that's something that I guess you guys want to disrupt.
So the fact that we took this story to someone like Rahul Dravid and he became a partner is a great validation for us. He brings credibility to a brand that we as a startup may not have had. You know, in kids category, parents talk a lot about children and what they use. And we think if we crack that network, word of mouth could be a single biggest draw for us to grow our business on.
That's interesting. But how do you go to market? What's the strategy there? A category like this, I'm assuming, you know, offline would play a huge role because people would still want to, wear, touch, and feel, and then decide on buying the product.
For us, as Matthew said, a significant part of the GTM model depends on going directly to schools. Once the trust in the brand and the experience builds up, then we can expect a higher share to come through online sales.
The last thing I wanted to, understand from you is your two biggest cost, I guess, would be sales and distribution. And branding, I guess that these are the two. I mean, distribution and branding, are these the two of the biggest cost centers for you?
Yeah, I would say yes. I would add a third one, which is innovation. You know, it's good to make one product and put out there, but in this category, people do get a little tired pretty quickly.
Right. And India is where you start, it's the home, but I guess sooner than later you will also start exporting to other emerging markets. Africa, I guess, Latin America, or across Asia, logical markets for you?
Yes, in fact, we've had some pretty strong interest from Middle East and Africa. But again, we're not trying to just sell a product there. What we want to do is take a very similar approach and go and study the African feet, which is very different from an Indian feet. And then make product for that specifically, so that the comfort and the fit that an Indian child can get, we can offer it to consumer in Africa too. And there is enough opportunity for products at such price points which are sustainable in markets like Europe. In fact, we've had a series of discussions with people in the sustainability space in Oxford and in Netherlands, and they are interested in seeing how we can take this product to Europe because of the sustainability benefit.
That's very interesting. It's really been an eye opener for me. I had no idea that a humble school shoe or a kids or sneakers as they are called today, there's so much of engineering, so much of science, so much of R&D that goes into it. It's amazing.
Let's also ask Mrs. Suja Tharoor, Principal, Indian Public School in Erode, Tamil Nadu, if there is indeed a use case for sneakers like Plato.
Mr. Ravi Kallayil had called me up once and wanted to know about the status of how PE classes are being conducted in schools. And then slowly he spoke about how the footwear or the shoes are so important for playing. I was very attracted for two reasons. One is the value for money, and the other one was, the benefits of comfort. So value for money in the sense like, children, especially in this middle years, that is when they are in grade 6, 7, 8, they outgrow the size of whether it's the dress or the footwear. So when they spoke about, that, they would get about extra half size, maybe they can actually increase the size of the shoes, which was very surprising, which I couldn't even believe how it could happen. Because what we feel is, we speak about skill-based learning for children, learning through experiential components, and then the holistic development of children and all that in academics. But then that is not being with the area of sports, because we lack in upskilling the PET.
But what about the kids themselves who have actually tried these products and find out from the horse's mouth, oops, horse's sneakers, if they're indeed making a difference.
My name is Tanisha. I'm 15 years old. When I wore the shoes, I actually don't know how long I wore them for, but I know it's a long time that I've been wearing them. I actually need new shoes really often because I ruin my shoes very fast. And so when I got these shoes, I was actually really like shocked. Like in 2 months, usually my shoes just wear out, and these didn't. They like stayed good for a really long time.
It's always great to measure twice and cut once. But as much as the concept sounds novel and promising, it will be no walk in the playground. This, as I said, is a hyper-competitive segment and extremely price-sensitive at one end of the spectrum. At the other end, being a product-led startup, the final product has to outshine everything else. If the differentiation is stark, then perhaps building a brand on top of that could become a shade easier. The Nikes and Pumas of the world are spending mega bucks to woo you and me with slick advertising and marketing. Competition going forward will also come from new direct-to-consumer alternate shoe brands that have started mushrooming, and those who promote sustainability, like Neiman's, many of whom are well-funded as well. For them, an expansion into the children's footwear category very soon is quite plausible, as the impact factor is the same. Also remember, trust goes a long way in the kiddie segment, and parents would rather spend an extra 2,000 to 3,000 rupees without batting an eyelid if they know they're buying into a pedigree brand. I'm personally not fully buying Ravi's strategy of relying so heavily on the school network to address the go-to-market strategy. I do expect some pushbacks from parents on that front as well. Second, does this category blend into online sales that easily? I'm not so sure. I would presume touching and feeling and trying out a product before buying a pair would be more of a norm than exception. So a hybrid model of online plus actual physical stores has to be sewn into the omni-channel blueprint along with the school networks. But what's the point if we don't make a start at least, right? Footwear is the fastest growing subcategory, and I'm told the online opportunity alone is that of $1 billion and growing. As Ravi mentioned, this is a 300 million school-going kids market. So slip it on, tighten your laces, and shall we say, just do it. I'm Arijit Barman, and you have been listening to The Morning Brief. This episode was edited and coordinated by Anjali Venugopalan, produced by Varun Kapahi, and sound editor was Soundarya Jayachandran. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. We look forward to your feedback. Write to us at themorningbrief@timesgroup.com. And if you've liked this episode, please share on your social media handles. We'd really appreciate it. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Friday. Thank you for listening and have a nice weekend. Goodbye. Good luck. All edited sound clips used in this episode belongs to their respective owners. Credits mentioned in the description.